Welcome to another edition of the Keep Africa Trading podcast, TradeMark Africa's podcast on all things trade across the African continent. My name is Moses Kemibaro and I'm your host for this particular edition. More importantly, our guest is one of the board members of both TradeMark Africa as well as Trade Africa Catalyst. She has a background in finance and is somebody who will be able to share with us some unique perspectives coming from TradeMark's point of view. More importantly, I think she'll be able to delve into topics around how TradeMark is supporting the private sector, looking at finance for SMEs, and also delving into areas such as how digital finance can unlock trade opportunities for businesses of all sizes that are trading across the African continent. Thank you for joining us, Patricia.
My name is Patricia Ojangole. I'm from Uganda. I currently work as the Managing Director for Uganda Development Bank. So I can say I am a finance professional. Uganda Development Bank is 100% owned by the government of Uganda. So in that context, I also have a kind of appreciation of government policy, especially in as far as what we intend to achieve through the private sector. Thank you.
So how long have you been a board member at TradeMark?
4 years.
4 years now?
I've been a board member for 4 years. Recall we recruited during COVID time. That's 2020. So since 2020, I've been on the TradeMark board. And then, of course, when TradeMark set up TCA, I represent TradeMark Africa on the TCA board as well.
So one of the things that we haven't really discussed on this podcast that we're doing over these 2 days at this particular conference is really talking about what the Trade Catalyst Africa does. Maybe you can expound and expand on what it is and how it works.
TCA is a subsidiary of TradeMark Africa. And it was conceived actually around the time of COVID. I think what we saw around that time was reduction in donor funding. So what specifically the board thought about was how do we sustain TradeMark Africa's interventions? Because the success story was good. We were not about to kind of scale down. We had to appreciate the realities and look at innovative ways of scaling up what TradeMark Africa had achieved. So TCA was established to be able to crowd in capital from different sources and then be able to finance some of the programs and projects that TradeMark Africa was doing. So essentially that is the role of TCA.
What's been the impact of TCA so far? I mean, I know that you're obviously on that board as well and you're quite involved, but what are some of the stories or anecdotes maybe you can share with us of the implications of the same?
Of course, some of the achievements have been the setup. We have managed to put in place an organization structure. We have a CEO, as you may have noticed. We have an investment director. We have a chief of party. But also, importantly, we've been able to get funding from USAID as seed capital. And with this, we're currently using to start to do the actual work for which TCA was established. So we have identified a number of investment opportunities, and the team is currently working to see that these investment opportunities can materialize into actual projects.
So the conference we're attending here in Kigali is all focused on digital trade. And we know that one of the most important things is to make sure that we bring along the SMEs so that they can benefit from these opportunities. Maybe from your point of view as a board member at TradeMark and both Trade Catalyst Africa, could you give us some perspectives around how SMEs can benefit from this and also possibly from digital finance?
One of the programs that we are doing at TCA is trade. And this is really how we can leverage on technology to be able to provide finance to businesses that may not ordinarily be able to walk into a formal financial institution, but leveraging on financial technology and be able to address this need or this gap. So there are a number of partners that would have to work with, advance money to them, that they have the expertise in terms of identifying, using credit scores, for example, to be able to assess, the credit worthiness and be able to advance financing. So that is one of the ways that TCA is doing to be able to catalyze financial inclusion in the SMEs that are not able to identify or are not able to crowd in financing. But talking about that, there are other opportunities that SMEs can take advantage of. Working with, like, TCA could partner with development finance institutions and be able to support together, identify programs that they can use to advance financing to SMEs. The issue around financing for SMEs, and the reason why some of the innovative programs are coming up, like digital finance, is the issue around risk nature of the SMEs. Like, everybody would say SMEs are risky, and that is one of the reasons why you find, like, capital does not flow to SMEs. But there need to be deliberate attempts by all the players to see what they can do to meet the SMEs in the middle. And I think for me, issues around supporting readiness. Currently, even the easiest things we want to do is let someone do, the hard work. But again, SMEs are also at different levels or stages. They're at different scales. Which ones are we looking at? Are we looking at micro, or small, medium? The digital interventions, I think, for me, kind of work well for the smaller ones and maybe the micro ones. But as they start to grow, now they are getting into maybe medium. So probably different interventions need to be done around that. So one thing that could be done would be hand-holding the SMEs. So you need to identify partners that can do a bit of de-risking, preparing them, and they are there. Like, I think where I sit and where I work, I've seen we've partnered with programs funded by USAID. We have our own programs where we handhold, SMEs, teach them how to do business, support them with formalization, issues around registration, compliance, until they get to a point where they can be able to access financing. So that is the work that needs to be done, and someone has to do it. And once that is done, you essentially de-risking the SMEs, and of course, those that do not want to take risk will find a portfolio of SMEs that are ready to kind of be funded.
So a lot of conversations have been had throughout the conference. Today is the second day, and I imagine that as you've been attending the various discussions and panels, possibly there are interesting insights you might want to share. But I would want to ask you, are there any sort of key takeaways that you can see from this particular forum, and more importantly, in the context of what it is that you do at TradeMark and also TCA, that maybe you'd want to share with the audience?
Yes, I think for me, the key takeaway, like what we were discussing yesterday, is around supporting the end-to-end of the value chains around the trade value chain. So when I'll go back again talking about finance. So finance needs to flow to projects, let me say, that are there and across the value chain, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's for production of goods and services by the private sector. And what we have seen lacking, just like discussed especially yesterday, is that the projects are not there. And this is one of the things that TCA is actually established to do, like create a portfolio of projects that can be done. What I've also realized from even my other experience is finance is actually available. And when you're talking about mobilizing and catalyzing finance, you need to also be looking at the deployment side. So they go hand in hand. And that's what we referred to yesterday as the next generation development finance, where you have to start from creating projects, creating bankable project pipelines across the value chains of interest, trade, infrastructure, trade, finance-related projects, producing goods and services, because without goods and services, there cannot be trade, yeah? So there is a whole lot of work across the entire value chain. So end-to-end, from demand side, creation of the projects, and catalyzing then projects and investments. So if we can create these portfolios, develop programs, develop projects, prepare projects, mobilizing financing to do whatever I want to do would become easy. The other thing that I think I can talk about as a key takeaway, especially talking about digital trade and everything digital, is the kind of skill set that would be required. This topic is very interesting, and it makes you realize, which is true, that technology and digitalization is shaping every economic sector. That's why we are here discussing about what is the implication, on trade. And it can be any sector. It can be agriculture, how is technology shaping the agriculture sector. Yesterday, we were talking about how we can increase productivity of the sector through digitalization. So there is the need for the people that are involved, in all these stages across the value chain, to have the right skill set, and how then do we ensure that either we reskill ourselves and then be able to also specifically identify the right skill sets that we need to support whatever we have to do in delivering what we have to.
Fantastic. Looking forward, are there any specific things that you see, maybe you think about 5-10 years out, that TradeMark and also TCA will be doing in 5 to 10 years that will continue to enhance and improve the trade scenario, again, looking through the digital trade perspective across the continent?
Yes, I think there's been success stories, especially for TradeMark. And I think what needs to be done is to scale this up. Of course, globally around us, there are lots of things that we call, or we like to call, challenges, but I prefer to call them opportunities across the board. We talk about climate change. What are the opportunities coming out of there? So looking at the future, I think we need to understand what are the trends, how are these likely to shape anything that we are doing, where are the priorities of our key partners, and because partnerships is also very, very key. So you need to identify, looking at where the trends are going, what are the new partners that we have to forge to help us deliver this, because we also must realize that we cannot deliver it on our own, but you need partnerships across the board, leveraging on expertise and experiences of different people, of different organizations, of different entities that are part of this trade value chain that we are looking at. So identifying where the future is, what does trade in the 21st century economy look like? I'm glad that is what we are discussing. How do we at TradeMark at TCA prepare ourselves to take advantage of the opportunities of what we may be calling maybe challenges, around us? So there are opportunities there. We just have to be able to identify them and take advantage of them.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'd like to come back to you at an individual level, because you've been on the board now for 4 years. You've obviously, I suppose, have a lot of passion for what you're doing there. I'd like to understand some of the key drivers or the things that inspire you by serving on the board of TradeMark. And more importantly, what have you seen in terms of impact that you might want to share with us? Maybe the anecdotes or stories of things that you've seen on the ground.
All right, thank you. What inspires me, and I give my bit of background, like where I come from. TradeMark Africa, I am Africa. We started at TradeMark East Africa, I am East African. When you talk about trade, when you talk about regional integration, I think that is what we are all aiming at scaling up in our different countries.
Correct.
Okay? Yes, so I think that is what inspires me about TradeMark. In a way, supporting every country. I come from Uganda. TradeMark has projects in Uganda. So given my own day job where I work at Uganda Development Bank, I have a similar mandate in terms of how do we enhance export promotion, maybe import replacement, production of goods and services, adding value to local, resources, production, basically. Because like I mentioned, without goods and services produced, there is no trade, okay? But then TradeMark then brings the opportunity in terms of removing barriers, facilitating trade. So what inspires and what motivates me is it's kind of an extension of what we'll be doing. And I think yesterday we were talking about how you eat an elephant, different. So, I mean, there is this elephant that is before us. So if we handle what we have to do at country level, partners like TradeMark, TCA come to support, to do what they can do. I think it's exciting. And I think for me, that's what motivates me. And that's how we should look at the complementary role of TradeMark and TCA on the continent. And of course, providing thought leadership on issues to do with trade. So opportunities for knowledge sharing and kind of looking into where the priorities, what we have to do. if there are projects that TradeMark are doing, for example, where I come from, and this could apply to anyone who's probably in the position that I am in the country. So it would be an opportunity to say, how can we collaborate? How can we work together? How can we leverage on the work that TradeMark or TCA is doing in the country for us to be able to get, some catalytic projects going?
Great. So as we come to the end of our conversation, I'd like to ask if there's anything else you think the audience should know, or maybe possibly you would like to share with them that will be informative, perhaps educational around the things that you yourself are doing and also what TradeMark is doing on the ground.
Maybe in terms of what I am doing, I'll maybe default back to finance and the role of finance. And what I want to say here is for everything to move, finance is one of the key interventions that I think governments really need to be deliberate around. How can they provide finance and support every aspect of the value chain related to trade? And maybe the other thing that I can say is the role of the private sector and how the private sector can be supported to produce. We are relying on the private sector. Even when it comes to investing in the kind of projects that we want, what we have seen is, of course, domestic resources, public resources are kind of reducing. The private sector are coming in to support. But for the private sector to be able to really come in, then there are a number of things from a policy perspective that need to be addressed. Basically, at every country level, you need to assess what are the key constraints of the private sector. I'll just give an example of Uganda. It will be things around how do you make the private sector more competitive, because you're relying on the private sector to produce goods, to trade, to do different things. I've talked about maybe power. You need to provide affordable power, electricity, or whatever you need to ease the cost of doing business, infrastructure, roads, railway, and then capital comes in as one of the key constraints, and yet it is a driver. So these things need to be handled, and for the private sector to be able to be competitive and get into trade-related kind of interventions, production, and then trading, movements of goods and services, issues around market access. Yeah. So I think here I'm seeing, of course, government would have a role to play, and then the private sector would have a role to play. So partnerships between the public sector, between the private sector, between anyone that come to that table, I think would be very, very critical. And I think maybe I would end there to say that let's identify how we can work together, and then work would become easy for, I think, everyone that is involved.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for sharing. I think those have been some very insightful comments you've given us. And I'm really wishing you all the best as you continue to serve on the board at TradeMark.
Thank you.
And also TCA, and more importantly, also the great work you're doing at the Uganda Development Bank.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there you have it. Patricia has given us interesting perspectives, being a board director at both TCA and also TradeMark. I think what she's shared with us is really the importance of finance across different levels for different scenarios, and more importantly, how governments and also stakeholders can work together to improve trade across the continent to ensure that we are able to get the benefits of the possibilities going forward. My name is Moses Kemibara. I've been your host on this podcast. Keep Africa trading for TradeMark Africa, and hopefully we'll catch you in the next conversation.